call the Honourable Paula Bennett.
Well, Mr Speaker, if you'd been listening to the opposition over the last few days since this budget, you would think the country was all doom and gloom. And they've just had a wedding and yet they're still already out of the honeymoon phase. They're already out of the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon is over. Mr Speaker, I want to stand up and put on record in no uncertain terms a huge congratulations to Bill English for what I think is an absolutely awesome budget. It's a budget that's sound, it's a budget that's solid, it's a budget that's actually delivering for New Zealand and New Zealanders, Mr Speaker. Actually, you still hear that doom and gloom of the opposition. I almost think they've done what I thought was kind of impossible, and I didn't think was actually possible too much, but they make Bill English sound positively optimistic and bursting with positivity, which of course that man does. And why shouldn't he? When you're looking at growth rates of 2.8%, when you've got projections of another 170,000 jobs coming on board, when you're seeing the average wage rise to 63,000 people, that's real money in real New Zealanders' pockets, making a real difference for them and their families. When you've got projections of unemployment falling to below 5%, and actually we should take a moment for this in all seriousness. When you see Bill English, who actually, when we needed it in this country, when we were at the GFC, when we were seeing Christchurch need it, we were in deficits of $18.5 billion. He's turned that round last year to surpluses. We've got surpluses projected of 700, and then going right up to that 2.5%. That deserves a round of applause for Bill English and the work that he is doing. Mr Speaker, he's paying off debt. As you would expect, as many households do themselves. When they can, they spend that money that they have to, but then they actually start paying it back as they can. And Mr Speaker, we are well on projections to have core crown deficits below 20% by 2020-2021, peaking this year at 25.6%. And I think that that is pretty extraordinary. And it's unsurprising that it is the envy of many in the world when you can see those sorts of numbers. And let's get to numbers. And there's one that I reckon hasn't perhaps had the attention that it could have. And quite frankly, I blame some of it on Dr. Coleman because your health budget things were so great. So when we're seeing just such big numbers in health, when we're seeing such big numbers in new schools being built, but actually I do want to concentrate just a little bit on that $761 million package for Innovative New Zealand. And Mr Speaker, I can put my Minister of Climate Change hat on for 1 second and just say that $411 million investing in science and innovation is actually investing in our kids, in us right now, and our futures, and what is coming through. Equally, you can see that coming into climate change, and you can see that making an absolute difference in that area. Tertiary education getting its fair share of this money, and I think making a huge difference when it really comes down to it. The list goes on, and I know that they get a little bit bored with it, but it's because there is so much happening, Mr Speaker. Let's go to public infrastructure. I mean, it is massive, Mr Speaker. We're talking new schools, we're talking new classrooms, we are talking over $880 million, Mr Speaker, investing in our children and their education. And I've heard many rhetorics from the oppositions, lots of little different bits chipping in, that this is not about the kids and their future, and then we see numbers like that make a real difference. Let's move to health, Mr Speaker. $2.2 billion. Thank you. Unnecessary, honestly. But the health actual budget in this does deserve a round of applause. They are absolutely correct. Let me get my numbers right. So we've got $1.6 billion going into DHBs. Now the $169 million going to disability support. We've got ambulance services, mental health getting more money. We've got bowel cancer screening, which is literally life-saving. Pharmaceuticals coming out, which of course we've heard some incredibly sad stories, and it is a privilege to be in government and able to put put that money in so that we can help those people who really need it. And the elective surgery and the numbers that are going on there are absolutely massive, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to talk about the money that's going into housing, and that is extraordinary. Thank you. It's just like, it is lovely. Are you feeling? I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the glow. Thank you very much. Because this is the government for the very first time that is actually putting money into emergency housing. So 41 million going into emergency housing that they can make as much noise as they like, but Labor never put funding into emergency housing and gave them certainty of funding to keep their doors open when they needed it. And they can carp on, but the truth is that it's this government that is delivering for all New Zealanders, Mr. Speaker. We are seeing $200 million more go into social housing to pay for those houses, more than 750 new houses on top of the more than 1,000 that are currently being built, and making a genuine difference for those people that are on need. We can hear rhetoric, or we can see a building program that is making an actual difference, Mr. Speaker, and that is what you are seeing on this side of the House. What I also want to touch on is the social investment package. And I do want to touch on the social investment package, Mr. Speaker, because it is very, very important. More than $650 million going into those more vulnerable children and their families, and making a substantial difference for them. And that is new money that's going into those very kids that are doing it the hardest in this country. It is about actually targeting your funding in the right place for the right length of time. That will make the right difference. And Mr. Speaker, if I can pick up on, you can see the difference that is happening within that social investment spend, and let's get to some real numbers here. So when we did the first valuation on welfare, it was at $86 billion. The latest valuation under Minister Tolley is now $68.4 billion, Mr. Speaker. That is an $18 billion difference. Now, you might not say that that's about real people, it's about real people. What that means is we have 55,000 fewer children. That is the population of Rotorua that are no longer growing up in welfare-dependent homes. They've got hope, their parents have got jobs, and they've got real opportunity, and that's happened under this minister and this government, and is absolutely making a difference. So we can do better. Because we can do better, we can always do better. So when you look at social investment and you start pulling in the spend from health, the spend from education, the spend within child, youth and family, the spend in the data that comes together, that recognises the hardship of those families, that they haven't got there overnight. It has been decades of neglect, quite frankly, and deprivation that has led them to where they are. This is the government that's stepping up, that's putting the money in where it actually needs it, and is making the biggest difference for those more vulnerable families. Mr. Speaker, we're seeing the benefits of last year's budget. We're seeing the extra money that actually went into beneficiaries' pockets for the first time in literally 40 years, that made one of the biggest differences that we've seen. This budget this year is a budget about infrastructure. It's a budget about investing in our future when it comes to Innovate New Zealand, and it's a budget that gets to the heart of New Zealanders for the health, the education, the justice, the law and order, the education and social welfare that matters the most to them. It's a budget that actually delivers in the future. When you look at growth, you look at debt coming down. It's the hard work and dedication of people like Bill English, who tirelessly work for this country, and giving people security and sensible policy and options, and a budget that fundamentally makes the biggest difference, Mr. Speaker. And alongside a leader like John Keane, who backs him with that kind of commitment that we see for this country, this is a budget that has delivered, Mr. Speaker, and I commend it to the House. Thank you.
Members.